to discuss more on this story, I'm now joined by Suhel Seth, who's the managing partner at Counsel Edge India. Thank you very much, Mr. Seth, for joining us here on ET Now. First things first, this almost seems like a repeat of the tariff story that's playing on right now. If you do not balance trade with the United States, we will slap tariffs on you. And if you do not play by our rules, we will cut funding. So what exactly is Trump trying to do here? What does he want?
See, it's quite clear that Trump is pursuing his agenda, Sumita, as he will. He's the president of the United States. Now, here is the dilemma. If Harvard wants to maintain its autonomy and its independence as an academic institution, as it has every right to, then why bother about federal funding? Then caucus snook and tell them that, look, we're not interested in federal funding. See, you can't have it both ways. You want federal money, which is under the control of the current president of the United States, and at the same time you talk about autonomy. You can't have it both ways. So they have to take a call. You know, I can't be subject to someone's benevolence and then curse that benevolence. So I think Harvard should take a stand, as it has, that look, we don't believe in academic freedom, we being thwarted. We don't believe that we should be non-autonomous. And if this is the way you behave, then to hell with your funding, we don't need it. But we will not compromise our values. You can't say that, look, I won't compromise your values, but still give me your money. It can't happen that way.
Well, Mr. Seth, it's the taxpayers' money, but won't you say, let's look at the other side of the story as well. Is it entitlement? Donald Trump claims that Harvard's response smacks of entitled behavior. Is it entitlement to stand up for the rights that have been guaranteed to you by the Constitution? And especially coming in from a man whose biggest supporter, Mr. Elon Musk, was claiming that the left was shutting out the right. And of course, they were infringing on the freedom of speech and expression. So won't you call this as ideological bullying by Donald Trump?
It is, but Sumita, he's a bully. He's bullying everyone. He's bullying nations. He's bullying the EU. He's bullying us. He's bullying everyone. But the tragedy is that he's the elected president of the United States. He didn't sneak in through the back door. You've got to live with that. See, I'm not for a moment suggesting what Donald Trump is doing is intelligent, fair, legal, or even acceptable behavior. But that's who he is. And take one example of tariffs. How did all the countries then suddenly fall in line? They did, other than China. So the point is, a bully is essentially a coward. You either have the courage and the capacity to push that bully back. If you don't, then just walk away from the fight. But the problem here is, Sumita, that we are mixing metaphors. Everyone knows that Trump's large voter base is middle America. He has never been a liberal. He has never claimed to be a liberal. He has very strong views, some of which are illogical, but those are his views. Now, you take it or leave it. I'm not for a moment even saying that what Donald Trump says is always intelligent or always logical. But he is using his powers as president, which has control over who has control over federal funding, to then launch this scathing attack. And people will have to push back. If they don't push back, then they sit quietly and change whatever he wants changed. Now, you tell me, these are large companies, Apple,
right.
Meta. They've all removed DEI. All of them have fallen in line. Where are the so-called liberals? Yes. Do you agree with what people have said to newspapers today? Even the New York Times, which is the last bastion of so-called wokeism and liberal thought, has fallen in line. So if people are falling in line, there must be compulsions. My point is that Harvard has a humongous endowment. Harvard doesn't need that 2 billion. And Harvard needs to take a decision. Is it the money, or should we retain our autonomy, retain our values, retain everything? Because he's going to use every trick in the book to make you fall in line. Right. You've got to decide whether you want to fall in his line or you just want to walk away and do your own thing. Because see, he's not going to be here forever. You will have to suffer
Mr. Seth, but it's
for 3 years more. I mean, yeah. Sorry, you were saying?
No, I was just saying that it's rather difficult for individuals and institutions to stand against the might of, an elected president. And he's making no bones about the fact that you either fall in line, like you rightly said, or we will cut your funding. So the question then is this a fight that Harvard and other universities can win against the Donald Trump administration? Harvard is the first university, perhaps, that, is sort of standing up against Trump. There have been other universities as well, which have kind of acceded to Donald Trump's demands.
So here's my thing. I think more than any other university, Harvard has both the capacity and the courage to stand up to Donald Trump. When they stand up to Donald Trump, they must stop whining about the fact that their funds are frozen. They must only talk about one thing, that we have not swerved, we have not strayed from our value architecture. And as Obama said, and I'm no huge fan of Barack Obama's either, but as Obama has said, Harvard University has set a standard. Now, other universities need to figure it out. But again, Sumita, the thing is, do they have the financial muscle to withstand this onslaught and yet remain the universities that they are? Do they have the courage to take on the US president? My feeling is a university like Harvard does. It has a very strong alumni. It has a huge endowment. It gets very large sums of money from donors. So I think if there's any university that can stand up to Donald Trump, it is Harvard. Now, you might turn around, or Donald Trump might turn around and say, no, Harvard is not pushing academics. They're pushing an ideological agenda. So be it. Let Harvard continue to do that. But, there's no such thing as partial pregnancy. You either take a firm view that, look, I will not buckle down, or you say, fine, I need the 2 billion and I'm going to toe the line. But I'll tell you one thing, Sumita, the more you toe his line, the more he will make you bend. So the question that you need to ask yourself, which in this case is Harvard or Columbia or Brown, is that how much are we willing to be humiliated, to be forced to surrender, and to give up both our values and our autonomy? That's a question that only Harvard or Columbia or Brown or whoever else can answer.
Right. Mr. Satan, since you're an alumni, you've studied at Harvard, do share your experiences of studying there, and basis your experiences, what do you think Harvard University is going to do in the near future? Right now, they have rejected Donald Trump's idea. They've stated that they're more than willing to engage in a conversation, but they're not willing to sort of have, the president or his office really infringe upon their ideas.
So a lot of people will call themselves Harvard alumni. I went to Harvard for an executive education program. Let me park that. I don't want to appropriate alumni status. I know when I finished the program, a lot of people said retain the email address because it has a lot of fanfare to it. So I'll say I went for an executive education program, which to my mind was absolutely brilliant. I was delighted both as an Indian and as someone who respected Ratan Tata for the Tata Hall that we have at Harvard Business School. I think it's a great university. It encourages free thinking, free speech, and academically very, very proficient. I've spoken at the India Business Summit that they had at another time. Harvard represents the truisms of America. Harvard represents value, it represents innovation, it represents academic rigor, and it represents diversity of thought. These are the 4 principles I would attribute to Harvard. And if even one of these pillars is shaken, the entire foundation on which Harvard has built both its legacy and its proficiency will fail. So my advice to Harvard University, not that they're going to listen to any of us, is stick to your guns. Because if you are willing to change, then you will have to change a lot, which will actually tinker with both your legacy and your future.
Right. Mr. Satan, what's the bearing, do you think, this decision will have on higher education across the country, across the United States? There have been other universities, like I stated, Columbia University acceded to Trump's demands. Princeton also acceded to some of the demands, and in fact, Cornell University and Northwestern University as well. I want to get your views on this decision and the impact that it will have on higher education across the United States.
So that, Sumita, is an excellent question. So three or four things are going to happen. Number one, if funding dries up, even 2 billion is a hell of a lot of money for a university. The first casualty will be all the funding of students who can't afford university fees at a Harvard. They will be sidelined and they will be punished in a manner of speaking. The second is all the proprietary research and proprietary academic work that these universities do will also suffer, because that's where a lot of the money is plowed, especially in universities which are hugely engineering focused. The third is the faculty will also suffer, because a lot of the professors are tenured, which means whether they teach 8 hours or 100 hours or don't teach at all, they remain tenured professors and they earn a salary. But the biggest casualty will be the freedom of speech and the freedom of thought, which university campuses across the world are known for and famous for. So, to my mind, these are the four things that will have an impact, which sadly shouldn't happen. But then, as I said, he didn't come through the back door. He's the elected president. He can do what he wants. And from Liberation Day onwards, you've seen how he set the trend as far as tariffs are concerned. He believes that an isolationist policy and the Trump way or the highway is the way to go, and that's how we've got to. That's what people have to live with.
Absolutely. But Mr. Say, there are constitutional safeguards, but let's also address the other, reasoning that he is given, that he wants to weed out anti-Semitism. Now, if that's to be nipped in the bud, surely, but stifling free speech is not really the way to it. Shouldn't that involve sensitization? And if there are issues with what he calls terrorist-inspiring sickness, surely there are legal ways to deal with that. And hence, when Donald Trump's actions, don't they seem, isn't that government outreach, since this especially is a violation of, the First Amendment, and isn't Donald Trump then exceeding the authority under Title VI?
So again, that's a super question, but let's analyze what's happening in America today. In his last term, he packed the Supreme Court with Republican-minded, non-liberal, very conservative judges. You saw what happened earlier last week when a district judge's decision on deportation was overturned by 9-0 at the Supreme Court of America. So he is not doing things illegally. He's going back to the courts. People are taking him to court, but the courts are ruling in his favor. See, there are three different arguments here, Sumita, that you've made. Number one, terrorist funding, terrorist activities on American soil. There should be no tolerance, whether it's Donald Trump, Barack Obama, Biden. So I'm totally with him on that. Number two, citizen behavior, deportation. If there is a legal way and if there is an illegality on the basis of aliens who are staying in America, they need to go, they need to go. Biden committed a huge mistake by allowing free access, and that created its own social tension. The third, right, which is the point you asked about constitutionality. The constitution of any country can only be tested, adjudicated upon by its highest court. And from what we are seeing of the Supreme Court of the United States is that they tend to agree with Donald Trump. Are they doing it because they're Republican-minded, conservative? Perhaps, but they are the ones who are adjudicating. So it's not as if there is an illegality. The point is, when people are taking the government to court, the government is winning. Trump is winning in court, and winning not by any dissent. It was a 9-0 judgment overturning the district court's ruling. So he is getting even more encouraged, saying that, look, even the courts agree with what I'm saying. So I think we're in for a rough time. Americans are in for a roller coaster ride, but that's how it is. And look, let's be honest, Sumita, everyone knew what Trump is and was about. So there are no surprises with Donald Trump. Whatever he promises, he does. He has told you. Now coming to the very, very important issue of anti-Semitism. The problem is that universities, and this I must say with no disrespect, universities for long across the world have been the hub of leftist thinking. An ideology which is against capitalism, which is, wokeism in recent cases or recent times, but it's always about anti-establishment. I'm against any anti, whether it's anti-Semitism, anti-this, anti-Hindu, anti-Muslim. But our campuses have been politicized across the world. Now, that's something that campus authorities need to take a call on, and not just Donald J. Trump.
Right, Mr. Seth, but going by that argument, isn't everything politicized? When Donald Trump says that, Harvard should lose its tax-exempt status and should be taxed as a political entity, it keeps pushing political, ideological, and terrorist-inspiring supporting sickness. Isn't that a political ideology that he's trying to, push in these universities? Hence, the question then is, where does all of this stop?
It won't stop. It
or
won't
rather,
stop
what's the
because
future that the United States is looking at?
Oh, let me tell you, the United States will not have a bad future. They'll just have very hectic 3 years and 9 months more, but they're not going to be, decimated. Look, Smita, go back into history. Everyone thought India was over during the emergency. We are resilient. We bounce back. Everyone thought that after, the whole UPA issues with crony capitalism, blah, 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 we'd be wiped out. We're back. So history has a fine way of telling the world that, look, if your edifice is strong, if your value architecture is strong, then you will be resilient against temporary shocks. But look, the fact is that Donald Trump is the elected president of the United States, and he has every right to do what he's doing. You and I have every right to disagree. We have every right to shout. We have every right to curse. But the fact is, he's been elected by the people of the United States. He's not, someone who's a nominee. We'll have to accept that. So the question that then needs to be asked, Sumita, is what's wrong with the United States? Not what's wrong with Donald Trump. Then you have to question, why has the electorate become the way it has? Why has the world become polarized? Why is the world always at war with each other? Why do we have a situation like we do in Israel and Gaza? Those are larger issues.
Right.
And for that, again, we need to go back into history. We
Right.
were never a non-polarized world, but polarization was not to this order, where it affected and impacted everything that was institutionalized, be it academia, be it the courts, be it, agencies, federal agencies in the US. But he's done that.
And that, Mr. Seth, doesn't look quite good. The US president has declared his plans. Now it's up to the university president to perhaps sort of build a united front against Donald Trump. Will they be able to? Can they be able to? That's a larger question that we'll have to wait and see how that story pans out. But for the moment, thank you very much for joining us here on ET. I appreciate you taking the time out and speaking with us.